Hey, everybody, it's Aslan and it's Corey, but it's not Wake Up Warchant. It's news that comes to Florida State football, which is what you all come here for. We appreciate that. Hit the thumbs up. That would be awesome. Maybe subscribe to our YouTube page as well. That's totally free. Hit subscribe. I think it's like in the lower right quadrant, maybe. And again, hit that thumbs up. That would certainly be cool. Corey, working on a Friday, man. Thanks for, keeping our nose to the grindstone here and letting us know that, hey, there's stuff going on here. Earlier in the day, Bishop Thomas announced, or rather, he's been removed off the roster from Florida State's Seminoles.com website. So Bishop Thomas, interior defensive lineman, played a little end this spring, apparently no longer with the program. Bit of a surprise, I feel like. I mean, we heard this coming down. Jeff Cameron and JCS show Tom Lang had been hearing about this, but it's official now. Mycah Pittman, who earlier in the day on Friday kind of had a false start, I guess, in terms of announcing his intention to enter the portal, deleted it, but has gone ahead and announced that he is going to leave Florida State and enter the transfer portal. How do you react to that news?
I mean, I don't want it to sound like sour grapes, Aslan. This is a big loss if he's healthy. I don't know how healthy he was going to be. I mean, hip surgery is a big deal. It said 4 to 6 months. He got that done when? February?
I think about,
late
right
January. So you're bumping right up against preseason practice, and he's a guy that needs his hips. Like if his hips aren't functioning, that deletes him as a football player. So if he had been the Mycah Pittman that he was last spring, I would say this is an enormous loss. I just don't. And also compounded with that would have been Winston Wright's injury. But now Winston Wright should be fully healthy, we think. So that helps alleviate some of the concern of this. And also, more than anything, you're talking about a 5'10" slot receiver who is not very fast or quick. He's not overly quick. He is a really tough kid, and I'm not trying to dismiss what he meant for the football team last year. But he averaged 25 yards a game receiving. He's not Johnny Wilson. He wasn't even Pokey Wilson. So with that said, that combination of pretty good player, I would argue nothing special, but a pretty good player and a starter, and an important starter, but coming off a hip injury, I just wouldn't have thought the market would have been big enough for him to leave a place like Florida State to go somewhere else, because it's such an unknown what he can be come August and September.
It definitely seems odd to the points that you've made. Again, this is what you see on your screen. This is what he tweeted out earlier in the day, then ultimately pulled down, but has gone ahead and announced that he will be entering the portal. I mean, some really kind, thoughtful, introspective words to his teammates and his coaching staff as well. He was getting into a little bit of a groove here. I mean, I'll pull up his Pro Football Focus numbers here. Last year was the most reps that he's ever had, and he graded out the best that he ever has in his short career here in college. But to think that a guy of his stature, kind of maybe limited in what he can bring to you as a wide receiver, is going to go ahead and pop in there coming off a pretty serious injury is pretty wild, man. But if that's what ultimately, maybe he brings something else to these programs, though, Corey, it sounds like. Maybe, his social media presence is perhaps valued, coveted by some other programs that think that he can help bring them visibility. So it's a crazy time that we live in now. So as much as his name, image, and likeness can benefit him, it might be able to benefit another program, it sounds like.
I mean, I guess we'll see how much that plays into it. I'm very interested where he ends up, because I'm interested in who was in the market for this. And again, I'm not trying to degrade Mycah Pittman, because his impact on the 2022 football team is measured beyond those stats, because the stats weren't great. I mean, he had 35 catches, he had 3 touchdowns, I think he had 330 yards receiving, somewhere in that neighborhood, 35 yards rushing. Again, averaged 10 yards a catch, had 3 touchdowns. All 3 of those touchdowns came in losses. So not that that's his fault. I'm just saying that's the reality of it. He caught 2 against Wake and 1 against NC State, and they lost both those games. He didn't have an enormous impact in the passing game. I think what he did run blocking, I think the tough catches he made, I think the mindset of having, and we've talked about this on Wake Up Warchant before, of having the smallest kid on your team be one of the toughest, one of the guys that always blocks hard, that runs through contact, that gets those tough catches for first downs. I don't think that can be oversold, how big that was for a receiving corps that needed players like that. We all remember what that 2021 receiving corps was like. And Mycah Pittman added to it. No, he was not Johnny Wilson. No, this does not hurt like Johnny Wilson leaving, or for that matter, probably even Kentron leaving. But it is a loss in the sense that I think he could have been one of your leaders. I think you looked at him to be one of your leaders. If you watch those YouTube videos he had, it sure seemed like he got along with everyone. But Maurice Smith and him had certainly a really good relationship. And Jordan Travis was flicking off the camera every other shot of that video. But again, I think they genuinely liked him, and I think he liked these guys. And I think when it's all said and done, I'd be really interested to know what precipitated this, why he would do this. Again, we talk about this every time somebody leaves, and it's fair game now. What kind of financial decision went into something like this to leave a place like Florida State where you were going to be a slot receiver and almost certainly a starter if you were healthy, to now go to any place where, man, you're not known, you don't have great measurables, and you're coming off in a very, very serious surgery in a really tough injury. So it'll be interesting where he ends up. It's just, good luck to him. I think the best place he had in college football is in Tallahassee, Florida. I think he had a coaching staff that believed in him. I know he had a quarterback that loved him and liked him a lot, and he got along with other guys. And now for the third time in 3 years, he's going to be on another roster trying to fit in, bringing his YouTube video with him, which is fine. I'm not begrudging him that. He makes money, and it's pretty good content. But that's something people have to adjust to. That's things that players in the locker room have to adapt to.
Nothing's adding up here, Corey, because I don't know. I don't think it's a financially driven motivation for him, but he was in a good spot. I mean, if his rehab goes well, there's nothing that Winston Wright did this spring that makes us think he's poised to break out, right? We're in the hoping that he's going to be good to go. We're not. I don't know how much in terms of hope for versus expectation of him being good to go. So, like, you were in a good position here in terms of like your playing time and financially. I think he's in a pretty good place. I'm pretty sure he was with one of these collectives. So this is a very curious kind of decision, and he's a smart kid. I don't imagine him leaving if he doesn't have a nice landing spot, which is going to be interesting to see where that eventually is, whether or not he's a contact or no contact when he's in the portal.
And I'm not. This isn't sour grapes. I don't want it to come off like this. Like every time a Florida State kid leaves, we're going to poo-poo it and say no big deal. I do think this is a big deal, but I don't think it's as big a deal for the production. I think you can combine Winston Wright and Ja'Kai Douglas and get that, and Vandrevius Jacobs perhaps in the slot, and get that production, maybe more. I mean, again, it's 35 catches. It was 300. It was 25 yards a game that he brought you in the receiving yards. So you're not losing a ton there. I think it's the intangibles. And I know people hate hearing that word sometimes, but I do think Mycah Pittman brought some toughness and intangibles that I don't know that Winston, and just a leadership quality, kind of a magnetic personality that I don't know that Winston Wright or Ja'Kai Douglas have. That said, if we turn our attention to what it means now that Pittman's gone, well, look, Winston Wright, did not do anything in this spring. He was still limited a bit. I think we both could agree with that. By the time August rolls around and they're practicing for LSU, he will have had 4 more months of, or 3.5 more months of rehab, getting stronger, getting faster. And let's be honest, and there's no way to know this for sure, but Winston Wright at 100% is a better college football receiver than Mycah Pittman at 100%. And on top of that, Mycah Pittman's not going to be at 100%. He is coming off a major surgery. So you're lucky that you do have a body, or maybe multiple bodies with Ja'Kai and Vandrevius that can step up and fill that void. I just wonder about the intangible stuff more than the production.
Well, I mean, thing for me, production-wise, is kind of this stat, which is something you were pointing out throughout the struggles when Mike Norvell first got here, and that was special teams. I mean, if we look at here, in terms of returns, last year they had 21 for 227. He had 18 of them. And I mean, let me juxtapose that to the year prior. And, just him just being back there catching the football was such a big deal for Florida State last year that I don't want to take that for granted. And when we look at the special teams and what the returns are, because look at the year before that, man, 17 for 71. That's significant, man. That's a significant thing when you have a really high power offense and you just know that, listen, we're going to get the ball. When they punt, we're getting the ball back and we're going to be probably pretty good field position because he's not going to let the ball sail over his head. He's going to make a fair catch, and he might score it ahead and get us 8-9 yards. That's the
well,
real loss.
So look, I know those numbers are wrong. If you're looking right there, it says 17 returns for 71 yards for an average that just does not make sense mathematically. They averaged about 4 yards a return in 2021 on punt returns. That does not account for the 180 yards they lost by letting the ball bounce. So Mycah Pittman not only averaged 6 yards more per return than the guys in 2021 did. What a collection of Deons back there in the return game. They didn't really quite get it done. But not only that, but he saved them so many yards by catching everything. And I think, Aslan, would you agree maybe, especially, again, I just think the hip calls everything into question. But the bigger loss might be having a guy back there that you trust to go catch punts, because now you got to go find somebody else. It is such a luxury to have a Kenny Shaw who was not a game breaker but caught everything for that 2013 team. It would have been such a luxury to have another guy like that, Kenny Shaw-esque, not incredibly fast, not a great returner, but catches everything and goes forward. It would have been a great luxury to have, to trust, to know you have that. Like, you don't even question he's going to catch it. And now you're going to have to break in a new punt returner, and that can be dicey at times, especially in big games.
I mean, think about they didn't cash in on all of it, but man, LSU put Malik Neighbors back there for the first time in his career to return punts. We all love Andrevius Jacobs, but a true freshman on a neutral field in a really big time game, having to maybe field a punt in a one possession game, that might give you a little bit of anxiety. I mean, otherwise they had Renardo Green back there returning some punts. He's a guy that really hasn't done that at all in his career. Azarie Thomas is a guy that's very limited access or experience rather doing that. We did see them mix in Winston Wright a little bit. Right. So that is that option there. But yeah, I mean, ultimately in terms of production on the field, on the offensive side of the ball, this gives you a little bit of concern, mild concern, I would say, but the special teams aspect is the bigger piece, because you feel good about Johnny, maybe Jaheim, Kyle Morlock, Marquise and Douglas, what they can do being in line or being flanked out as tight ends, that can maybe help you on the slot. So, again, we don't want to make it sound like it's not a big deal, but there's
and again, he wasn't a slot guy that had the normal quickness of a slot guy. He was like a power receiving slot guy.
Possession. He was like a possession slot guy.
He was, but didn't have breakaway speed clearly, didn't have incredible quick twitch, but was a really tough kid. And I want to compare him. He was a big deal coming in that transfer portal class of 2022. I can't remember the timing, but I think he came before Johnny. And I think he had a pretty good hand, because they were high school teammates and he knew him, of getting Johnny to Tallahassee. But it was just having somebody like Mycah Pittman, who was still a big name at that time. He was a big-time recruit. His brother obviously plays in the league. His dad played in the league. Getting somebody like that to commit to you after another losing season can't be overvalued. It can't be overstated how important that was to get a name like that to Florida State at that time. He made it kind of cool. Not cool, man, to be the right word, but doable for Florida State to go and get players of that caliber, of that ilk. So I think I want to kind of compare him to like Jeff Luke in that class with Jimbo Fisher in the 2010 class. Now, Jeff Luke ended up finishing his career at Cincinnati, but he was a top 40 player in the country, was a almost 5-star linebacker, was a really big deal. And when he committed to Jimbo's first class after Bowden was fired, that kind of got the ball rolling. And maybe we remember Mycah Pittman as that guy. It was only here for a year. He didn't do a ton on the football field. He scored 3 touchdowns, but he helped bring in the new wave of Florida State success, because it certainly catapulted what they did in the portal, because he was a really big get when they got him.
All right, there you go, folks. Mycah Pittman, again, has entered the transfer portal. We will have more reaction, more analysis over at warchant.com, the ultimate Seminoles sports source. So do stay connected. Head over there. It's only $29.99 for full premium access. Hit the thumbs up. We got Corey to hang out with y'all for like 15 minutes on a Friday. Right. Who doesn't love that, man? Thank y'all. Have a great one. Thanks, Corey.